So in this video, I would like to take a look at Webpack. Webpack is a module bundler that bundles our files together, and it generates static assets that can be used in the browser. So I particularly want to take a look at TypeScript. So let's say we have multiple TypeScript files and we want to combine them together into one bundled JavaScript file, and so we can use that in the browser in our HTML file. So by default, Webpack works with native JavaScript loaders. So if we want to take a look at TypeScript or other loaders such as Babel to compile our modern ES6 code into ES5 for maximum browser compatibility, we can transform these other resources through a loader, and we'll take a look at that. But firstly, let's just go ahead and create a new package. So we can go npm and make sure you have Node installed, of course, init-y, so I'll just say yes to all of the questions. And okay, so now what we'll do is we'll install a few dev dependencies. So we can do an npm I for install -d for the dev dependencies, and we can type in Webpack CLI, and also TypeScript. And what that will do for us is inside this package JSON file, it will add it as dev dependencies. So we have them as dev dependencies and not as dependencies, and that's because we don't want it in our production code. So this will, Webpack will compile this together for us, and then it will output the file after we configure the settings for it. So it doesn't need to be a dependency. So okay, so we can see that we've added the latest versions here, and what we can do is we can make a Webpack configuration file. So to do that, we can create a new file, and this is called webpack.config.js. and in this configuration file we can go ahead and we can have a module.exports, so it's available in other places, and then we need an entry point for our application that we're bundling together. So we can go ahead and we can create a new folder, and we'll just call this source, and inside the source folder we'll have a file called index.js for now, and we'll just do a console log here, and we can say index.js. okay, so this means our entry point for our app that we're bundling together is going to be in the source folder in the index file, and we're bundling that code from that source, and we need to put it somewhere. So we can say we can have an output, and this output we can put so let's say we want to put it in a dist folder. So we need to have it relative to the current path, and we want it related to where this directory is, so this Webpack TS directory. So what we can do is we can set the path to __ dir name, so that will be that current directory, and then we can tack on this /dist, so we can make a dist folder, and that's where we'll put it. And then within that dist folder, within that path there, we can have a particular file name, and we'll call ours bundle.js. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go back to our package.json, and we'll delete this test script here, but what we'll do is we'll create a build script instead. So when we run npm run build, what we can do is we can use Webpack and we want to build the application for production. So we want to bundle it up for production. So we can go ahead and we can type in mo --mo for production. And the difference between production and development is that development it has hot reloading, whereas production it optimizes for a minified bundle. So we could actually have two scripts here. We could have prod and dev. So let's go ahead and just get two different scripts. And whilst we're in dev, so this will be for development. One thing we may want to do is we may want to add a watch flag to this. So we could also have a --watch. So now if I go ahead and I do an npm run dev, okay, so we get an error. Okay, so it's not set up just yet for this watch yet, but we could have let's just run a production version. So run prod, npm run prod, and we can see already that this has bundled up our file, and it's not too impressive because it's just the one file from the source folder, but it's outputted it in this dist folder in bundle.js, and this is the minified version, so it's not very readable. But we can see that what it's done here is it's sort of made the file size as small as possible, whilst also bundling our files together. So what we really want to do is we want to put more than one file together, and so and we may also want to do things like convert the types, so like TypeScript into JavaScript, or maybe we have JavaScript but we want Babel or something like that, to break it down to ES5, but we'll just use TypeScript. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to install as a dev dependency a TS loader. So we'll get that first, and okay, so we'll see that it's added to a dev dependency. What we can do now is we can create a tsconfig.json file. So this is our TypeScript configuration. tsconfig.json, and okay, actually instead of creating it from scratch, I might actually sort of use the TypeScript compiler command. So tsc-init. Oh, well, I'll delete this and then run tsc-init, and this creates a TypeScript file for us, and we'll just make a few edits here. So what we can do is we can have a look at these compiler options for TypeScript, and we want to change so we'll keep the target as ES5, so that means we'll, after it's bundled, we'll get ES5. The module can be common.js, that's okay. So we want to set source map to true, generates corresponding .map files. We want to actually, this module we might actually change to ES6. So we're expecting that. What else? So we need a module resolution to be node. So that's what we're using as our module resolution strategy. We need to allow for JavaScript, allow JS. We need to allow for these to be compiled. Now we don't have to include this because we're doing TypeScript, but we'll just do it for now. And our library that we can be using will be, let's use ES 2017 and DOM. So these are the files we're expecting to include in the compilation. So we want to use the latest features, but then we compile it back down into this ES5 target here. And okay, and one thing we definitely need to change is the output directory. So we'll have a look at that. Output directory, and we want to put it in this dist folder here. So we can go ahead and we can just say /dist, yeah, with a slash there. And one more thing is we might want to make our TypeScript a bit more robust and have no implicit any. So this will raise an error on expressions and declarations with an implied any type. Okay, so there are our main settings we're going to set up in the tsconfig file. Now what we need to do is we need to edit our Webpack configuration JavaScript file. So let's go ahead and take a look back over here. And okay, so one thing we may want is we want to require the path, and this will be used to resolve our directory's location, so the dist folder's location. And this module exports, this is all in the context relating to the root file or root folder, so the dir name, which is Webpack TS in our case. And we've got our entry file, we've got our output, and what we can do is we can sort of adjust this with our path. So we can go path.resolve, and okay, so then we can resolve the dir name and the dist, and that's a comma separation there. And we can have the public path as /dist/. So okay, so now we've got TypeScript, we need to specify the module rules. So we can do this in the module, in the rules, and this takes an object. And okay, so what we're testing for here is we're looking for all of the TypeScript files that we have in our root directory that aren't in this node modules here. So we need to have a pattern or an expression to find this. So we can test for, and we use a / /.ts $/ and that's just an expression for all the files ending in the TypeScript extension. So we also want to exclude the expression for node modules, so that's just /node modules/, and we want to use a particular loader, and for that loader we installed earlier was the TS loader. So we can type that in here just like that, and we need to resolve our extensions with the TS file. So we can go ahead and just type in resolve here, extensions, and we can have our TypeScript files that we're resolving here, and we just need a comma here. So with that we have our Webpack configuration set up and our TypeScript configuration set up, so we can now resolve our TypeScript. So I'll just go ahead and I'll just delete this bundle here in this folder, because we'll be able to create a new one anyway. And what we can do is we can just sort of make a couple of files. So I'll make a let's see here, I'll make a in our source folder I'll make 2 files, and I'll make a second file, and I'll just call this I don't know, temp.ts, and I'm going to rename this JavaScript file to index.ts. And since I've changed this to index.ts, I'll need to change that main file here to ts in the package.json, and I'll just check there's nowhere else I need to change that. Oh, okay, so this entry point is now going to be the index TypeScript file. So in this index type, or in this temp file, I'll just do a console log saying temp.ts, and I might just, before I console log that, I might just say explicitly like string. So I'll use a constant variable string, which is an ES6 notation, and I'll call it string1, and I'll set this to a string type, and this will be equal to temp.ts, and I'm explicitly typing in string here, the type, so we can see, and this ES6 constant variable, so we can see that the TypeScript compiler is compiling it down and what's happening into the bundled folder, in the bundled file. So I can save this, and since we're using TypeScript now, in the index file, what we can do is we can go ahead and import that. So we can import, let's see here. Well, that means, okay, so we'll have to export this, let's say. So let's export this, and rather than console log it, I'll just export that. And okay, so that means over in the index file, what we can do is we can import string1, and if we wanted to, we could give it some sort of alias, so as s, let's say, and we can take this from the temp file, the TypeScript file there. So now we can, in addition to logging the index.typescript file, we can console log that s. So that s is just this string1 of the type string, which just says temp.ts. So we can save that, and okay, so now what we'll have to do is we'll have to run our build command again. So we'll call that in the package.json, we set up the production build command to be npm run prod, and that's successfully created this dist folder with this bundle here, and we can see that, okay, so if we look for the keyword const, that's not in there, and if we look for string, it actually, you know, it compiles the TypeScript down so that both the ES6 and the TypeScript are ES5 and available in the browser. So I guess what we can do here is in the root directory, I can just create an index.html just so we can see the console log in action, and just in the body tag here I'll just have a script, and that will be relative to the dist folder and the bundle.js script that we just created. So I can go ahead and save that, and I can open this up with live server. I've got an extension here by let's see here, live server by root width day, and what that allows us to do is in HTML files we can go and we can open with live server, and okay, so that opens up this page for us. And if I take a look at the console, I can see that I've got the bundled index.ts and the temp.ts console logs as expected. Okay, so that's how we can go about using Webpack to bundle TypeScript files. And you know, it's not limited to TypeScript. There's a whole huge array of things that we could do here. I'm just using this as an example, but if you don't want TypeScript, maybe you can repeat the same sort of steps, but rather than using the TypeScript loader, you can use the Babel loader, for example. So yeah, you've got a huge amount of options and flexibility in your projects. Okay, so one thing I did a little early in this video is I accidentally typed in the watch flag in between the mode and development, but really the watch flag should be here. And what this will allow us to do is if we run npm run dev, and we sort of want to put the watch on the development mode rather than the production mode. So while we're developing, we're watching for changes in these files here. And okay, so let's change something in our temp file, and I'll just add an exclamation mark here. If I save this, we can see a slight change in here, and if we look into our disk folder, or rather we look at our browser, we can see this exclamation mark that occurred just in here. So that's like the hot reloading, essentially related to the dev, like watching the development environment. So we are now able to use Webpack, and it's essentially just an extension of just our regular package.json configuration settings. Like, so if you're familiar with Node and npm managing dependencies and dev dependencies, really we're just adding one extra thing by installing the Webpack and using this Webpack configuration file to you know, resolve our modules of choice into a particular bundle. And this TypeScript configuration file, that's more related to TypeScript, and if you're not familiar with TypeScript and getting that set up, I have a whole video on you know, configuring the TypeScript settings and getting started with TypeScript. So yeah, I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next one.